It was 2 a.m. at Sandringham Estate, the sprawling country retreat that had witnessed generations of royal births, deaths, and whispered secrets. Outside, the winter wind clawed at the bare trees, rattling the estate's ancient windows, while inside, a silence hung heavy, one so profound it seemed almost tangible. But that silence was about to be shattered in a way no one had anticipated. No one. That is, except for the person who stumbled across the door that had been forgotten for decades. A door that was locked, barred, and hidden behind layers of dust and old wallpaper. A door that, when finally opened, would reveal letters from Princess Diana, written during the final weeks of her life. Letters that warned her sons about a threat within their very own family. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine for a moment what it must have felt like to unlock a door to the past, to touch paper that had once held a mother's most desperate pleas. Can you feel the chill? The mix of fear and awe as you realize that in your hands lie secrets that could shake the monarchy to its core? This isn't just another story about the royal family. This is a story about trust, betrayal, grief, and the unseen threads that connect the past to the present. And for those who have followed Diana's life, her struggles, her heartbreak, and her undying devotion to her sons, this discovery hits harder than any headline or documentary could ever convey. It started quietly. A housekeeper, tasked with routine cleaning, noticed a draft coming from behind a heavy oak bookcase in the east wing. The estate had been undergoing renovations, and while most areas had been combed over, this particular section seemed untouched. A subtle keyhole glimmered in the dim candlelight. Curiosity nudged her closer. There was hesitation, a moment where most would have walked away, but something about the keyhole called to her. She found an old brass key, hidden behind a painting of the Queen Mother. She turned it slowly. The lock clicked. When the door creaked open, the air inside smelled of time itself, dust, faint perfume, and the mustiness of a space long abandoned. Rows of shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes, bundles of letters tied with ribbon, and a few faded photographs. But what drew her attention immediately was the handwriting. Unmistakable, flowing, filled with emotion and urgency. Princess Diana's handwriting. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. These weren't ordinary letters. They were intimate, confessional, desperate. Letters that could rewrite everything the world thought it knew about the Princess of Wales. Why does this matter now, after all these years? Because for decades, Diana's warnings were dismissed, her fears attributed to paranoia, her concerns about the monarchy labeled as melodrama. But the world has changed. Her sons, William and Harry, are no longer boys shielded from the harshness of royal life. They are men, carrying the weight of their mother's legacy, and now, potentially, her final warnings. And the timing could not be more shocking. The overnight tragedy that struck Sandringham has left the royal family in mourning, a shadow of dread hanging over the estate. And the discovery of this secret room only intensifies the mystery, raising questions that have been buried for decades. The letters reveal an extraordinary level of foresight. Diana's words speak of trust betrayed, of hidden threats that could compromise the family she loved so fiercely. She speaks directly to her sons in ways that are tender, heart-wrenching, and at times terrifying. She urges them to be vigilant, to question loyalty, and to be wary of those who might seek to manipulate or harm them from within the palace walls. Can you imagine receiving a letter from your mother warning you of danger? Danger that had been invisible to everyone else, even those closest to her? And yet, these letters exist. They are proof that Diana was not only aware of the complexities of royal life, but that she anticipated the very challenges her sons would face decades later. But the room also contains mundane, human details that make the discovery feel eerily intimate. There are letters about tea preferences, about favorite gowns, about conversations with close friends. Notes about fleeting moments of joy, trips to Balmoral, the quiet solitude of Kensington Palace. These aren't just warnings. They are snapshots of a woman navigating a world that often misunderstood her, fighting to protect the ones she loved even as her own life was spiraling toward tragedy. It's this combination of the personal and the prophetic that makes the discovery so extraordinary. The first letter that caught the estate staff's attention was addressed simply, William and Harry. The ink was slightly smudged, as if she had written it in haste or under duress. The words inside were haunting. Diana spoke of loyalty and deception, love and manipulation, naming no one directly, but hinting at dangers that could only be interpreted through the lens of someone who had experienced palace intrigue firsthand. She urged her sons to trust themselves, to question what was presented to them, and to recognize that not all allies were true allies. Every line carried urgency. Every word weighted with the fear of what might happen if her warnings were ignored. As news of the discovery began to leak, the palace's security and communication teams scrambled. The world outside Sandringham remained unaware, but inside, there was a sense of collective unease. Staff whispered in corridors. Royal aides reviewed historical documents. Experts in Diana's life were called in to examine the letters. The implications were staggering. Could these letters change public perception of the monarchy? Could they validate suspicions that Diana had been right about threats no one else had taken seriously? And more chillingly, could they provide insight into the overnight tragedy that had plunged the estate into mourning? Consider the weight of what this means for William and Harry. For years, they have navigated a world of privilege and scrutiny, always in the shadow of their mother's legacy. Now, they are faced with physical evidence of her foresight. Her fear, her grief, her determination to protect them even after her death. Imagine reading words from your mother that describe dangers you had never imagined, threats that might still be relevant today. The letters are not just historical artifacts. They are instructions, warnings, and pieces of a puzzle that has haunted the royal family for decades. And the public reaction is inevitable. Once the story leaks fully, social media will explode. Analysts, journalists, and conspiracy theorists will dissect every line, speculate about every implication, and debate the authenticity and meaning of every letter. But for now, the estate keeps the discovery under wraps, knowing that the full implications cannot yet be revealed. The tragedy that occurred overnight and the secret room together form a story that is more than just scandal. It is history unfolding in real time, revealing truths that have long been hidden. But even as the discovery made headlines within the estate, one question loomed over everything. What exactly was the threat within that Diana had warned her sons about? And who among the people they trusted most might have played a role in the danger she anticipated? Staff members speculate, royal historians theorize, and the brothers themselves must confront questions that no one should ever have to answer. The weight of expectation, the burden of legacy, and the shadow of their mother's final words all collide in a moment that is as terrifying as it is mesmerizing. The letters themselves tell stories beyond warning. They reveal Diana's moments of doubt, her fleeting happiness, her observations about people around her. There are references to aides, friends, and distant relatives, all captured in delicate, almost poetic handwriting. But hidden among these mundane entries are lines that hint at betrayal, manipulation, and fear, lines that are as chilling as any modern thriller. Imagine the tension of reading a letter that is equal parts motherly advice and prophetic warning, a letter that demands attention and careful interpretation. And while the world may never know the full extent of what Diana predicted, the discovery of these letters and the secret room at Sandringham changes everything. It is a reminder that history is not always linear, that the past can reach into the present, and that truths long hidden can surface when least expected. The letters provide not just insight into Diana's mind, but also a lens through which to view the challenges that William and Harry continue to face. They remind us that even in a world of grandeur, wealth, and tradition, the human element, fear, love, grief, hope, remains at the center of everything. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. As the estate staff began to sort through the letters, one particular envelope, sealed with a crimson ribbon and marked with Diana's unmistakable handwriting, was set aside. It was addressed simply, to be read only in the event of tragedy. A sense of foreboding hung in the air. What could possibly be inside? And who would be the first to read it? The answers promised to shake the royal family, and perhaps the world, to its very core. The night at Sandringham had started as another quiet evening in the life of the monarchy. By dawn, The discovery of the secret room and its contents had transformed it into a moment of historical reckoning. Letters from the Princess of Wales, warnings of threats unseen, and an estate plunged into mourning, a combination that no one could have anticipated. For the royal family, this was not just another chapter in their storied history. It was a call to confront truths long buried, to face fears that had been ignored, and to reckon with the legacy of a mother who had always seen more than anyone else. And as the sun rose over Sandringham, casting pale light across frost-covered lawns, one thought lingered in the minds of all who had glimpsed Diana's letters. What else could she have seen? What other secrets had been hidden in the corridors of power, waiting for the right moment to surface? The answers were out there, somewhere, and the journey to uncover them was only beginning. It began as an ordinary night at Sandringham, the sprawling royal estate tucked away in Norfolk, where history seems to seep from every corner of its ancient stone walls. The estate had witnessed over a century of births, funerals, and whispered conversations, each more secretive than the last. To the casual observer, the night appeared calm. The estate's lights glimmered through frost-kissed windows, deer grazed quietly in the distance, and the wind whispered through the pines, almost like a soft warning that something was about to change. But as with many things in the lives of royals, the ordinary often masks the extraordinary. The tragedy that unfolded that night would not just shock the palace staff, it would ripple across the nation and cast a shadow over the monarchy itself. No one could have anticipated how swiftly an uneventful evening would spiral into chaos, grief, and disbelief. A single incident, initially dismissed as minor, quickly revealed itself to be something far more sinister. It started with a disturbance near the estate's east wing, where the oldest staff members sometimes swore the walls themselves seemed to breathe. One of the housekeepers, a woman who had served the estate for over 20 years, heard a noise unlike any she had ever encountered. A faint, almost imperceptible thud followed by a metallic clang. Her heart raced. Could it have been a fallen object? A loose shutter flapping in the wind? Or something far more alarming? She hesitated, unsure whether to investigate or retreat. Most of the staff, trained to maintain composure at all costs, would have dismissed it, but she could not. There was something in the air, a heaviness, a tension that pressed down like a hand on her chest. She reached for a flashlight and moved cautiously down the dimly lit hallway. Her steps echoed, each one magnified by the eerie silence of the estate. As she rounded the corner, the beam of her flashlight fell on a figure, or perhaps a shadow, moving too quickly to be human. A chill ran down her spine. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice trembling despite her years of experience. No answer came, only the soft hiss of the wind slipping through a cracked window. In the main wing, alarms began to sound, not the estate's official security systems, but a chain reaction of panic as staff began to realize something was amiss. Phones buzzed. Messages were sent. Doors were double-checked. The household aides, trained to protect and anticipate royal needs, scrambled to assess the situation. The air was thick with fear, confusion, and disbelief. Something had happened, but what? The tragedy itself, initially, was subtle in appearance. At first glance, it seemed almost mundane. A faint smoke smell, a door left ajar, a misplaced key. But the implications were staggering. By the time the senior staff arrived, it was clear that this was no ordinary disturbance. The incident involved an area of the estate rarely accessed by anyone. The older wings, containing archival documents, private letters, and relics from generations of royals. Somehow, whatever had occurred had left its mark on history itself, threatening not just property but legacy, trust, and, perhaps most shockingly, safety. Royal aides were called in, their faces pale under the estate's dim lighting. The whispers started almost immediately. "It's the East Wing." "No, the old library." Could it be? But no one dared finish the thought. The mansion, usually a bastion of order and decorum, had become a place of fear, each creaking floorboard amplified in the tense silence. Every staff member instinctively knew that the gravity of the night exceeded anything they had experienced in decades. And the most terrifying thought lingered unspoken. Whatever had happened could affect the family themselves. Prince William and Prince Harry, miles away at the time, were alerted immediately. Security protocols meant that the palace staff could not move forward without informing the heirs. The brothers, grown men yet eternally their mother's children, were faced with an unsettling reality. Sandringham, the estate tied to decades of family memory and tradition, had become the epicenter of potential disaster. Their phones lit up in rapid succession, messages from aides, alerts from palace security, calls from worried staff. Each notification carried an undercurrent of dread. As news reached them, William's mind raced through worst-case scenarios. He thought of Diana, of her warnings that no one had ever taken seriously. Could the threat she feared, the hidden dangers she anticipated in the palace's corridors, be unfolding now? Harry, ever the emotional counterpart to William's measured pragmatism, felt the old familiar sting of panic. Memories of his mother, her struggles, and her untimely death resurfaced with brutal clarity. What had begun as a quiet night was now a confrontation with history, memory, and the unknown. Back at the estate, the staff found themselves in uncharted territory. Doors were barricaded, windows checked, and sections of the estate systematically searched. In the grand hall, portraits of past monarchs seemed to watch with silent judgment. Even seasoned security personnel admitted to a gnawing unease. Something had happened in the heart of the estate that no protocol could fully contain. And yet, they knew the family needed answers, and quickly. Then came the discovery. Behind a false panel in the east wing, a small, hidden door had been revealed. Dust thickened the air, and the wood was cold to the touch. No one had accessed this door in decades, possibly generations. Its very existence had been forgotten, erased by time and habit. But now, its presence was undeniable. A single, brass key fit perfectly into the lock, turning with a click that echoed louder than expected. What lay behind the door was not immediately visible, but the estate staff could sense its importance. The room beyond the door was a time capsule, untouched, filled with boxes of letters, bundles of correspondence tied with ribbons, and stacks of documents. And then, there it was, handwriting unmistakable, flowing, precise, and yet trembling with emotion in certain places. Princess Diana. Her letters, written during the final weeks of her life, some unsent, some addressed to her sons, lay before them. The tragedy, they realized, was no longer just about an incident in the estate. It was about the revelation of Diana's fears, warnings, and unseen insights. The room contained truths that could reshape the understanding of her life, her death, and the dangers she had long anticipated. Imagine the tension in that moment. Every step, every breath seemed amplified. Staff exchanged glances, some gripping each other's hands, others frozen in awe. The estate, a place usually governed by ritual and predictability, had become a theater of suspense. The letters were more than paper. They were a bridge between past and present, a warning cast across decades. Who could have predicted that a single night at Sandringham would unlock such a torrent of emotion and revelation? And the tragedy, it seemed, had layers. The initial disturbance. The noise, the thud, the hint of danger was only the surface. Beneath it lay decades of secrets, suppressed fears, and a mother's desperate attempt to protect her children from threats she perceived too late. For William and Harry, the weight of these letters, combined with the events of that night, forced a confrontation with history and memory that no one in the royal family could ignore. As the night stretched into early morning, staff continued to process what they had found. Each letter was examined, catalogued, and studied for context. Analysts in royal history and palace protocol were called in to decipher references, understand coded warnings, and interpret Diana's intentions. And yet, for all the expertise brought in, a sense of unease persisted. The letters contained warnings that were subtle yet potent, phrases that hinted at betrayal, manipulation, and danger from those closest to her sons. Could the family have anticipated this? Could they have prevented it? But even with all the letters examined, one envelope, placed at the very back of the room, remained untouched. Crimson ribbon, heavy paper, her unmistakable handwriting, to be read only in the event of tragedy. The estate staff felt a collective shiver. Whatever lay inside could redefine everything. The letters had been a warning, a glimpse into Diana's mind. This final envelope, however, promised revelation. A truth so impactful that it could shake the foundations of the monarchy itself. The tragedy at Sandringham was no longer just an event. It was the beginning of a story that would expose secrets, evoke grief, and challenge perceptions of the royal family in ways no one had anticipated. The night, which had begun quietly, had become a crucible for history, memory, and legacy. And the question now lingers in every mind within the palace walls. What exactly was inside that final envelope? Who would be brave enough to open it first? And how much of Diana's foresight had finally come to bear on the royal family she loved so fiercely? The answers, as the first hints of dawn crept over the frost-covered grounds of Sandringham, remained just out of reach. But one thing was certain. Whatever was discovered that night would change the course of the family's history, and the world would be watching when the truth came to light. The night of tragedy had only just begun, and the secrets it unearthed would continue to ripple through Sandringham, through the royal family, and through the lives of William and Harry in ways no one could have predicted. No one had ever known it existed. Not the staff, not the royals, not even the historians who had catalogued every inch of Sandringham for decades. And yet, there it was. A door, unassuming and almost apologetic in its placement, tucked behind a forgotten bookcase in the estate's east wing. A door that had remained locked for decades, its existence erased by time, habit, and perhaps by design. But now, in the quiet hours of a night that would forever be etched into royal history, it had been discovered. The housekeeper, whose name would soon circulate in hushed conversations across the estate, was the first to notice it. At first, she thought it was just another shadow cast by the moonlight through the frosted windows. But something about the faint outline of the door, the subtle keyhole glimmering like a secret waiting to be told, caught her attention. She stepped closer. The air grew colder, denser. Her breath fogged in the beam of her flashlight. Every instinct told her to stop, yet her curiosity was relentless. The door was deceptively simple. Its surface was plain oak, the handle unremarkable, the hinges old but sturdy. A brass key protruded slightly from a hidden compartment in the wall, a key that had obviously been placed with intention, as if someone had wanted it to be found, but only under the right circumstances. She hesitated for a moment, hand on the key. Could it be? Should she turn it? And if she did, what might be waiting inside? Her fingers trembled as she slowly turned the key. The lock clicked. A sharp, metallic sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet of the estate. And then, the door creaked open. The first wave of cold air was shocking, almost electric. Dust swirled in the beam of her flashlight, coating the floor in a thin, silvery haze. The room beyond was narrow and lined with wooden shelves, filled with boxes and bundles of documents tied with ribbons. Faded photographs leaned against the walls, some framed, some loose, all waiting silently, as though holding their breath. It was not the room itself that was astonishing, it was what lay inside. There, among the boxes and papers, were dozens of letters. Some were tied neatly with faded silk ribbons, others stacked haphazardly, as if placed in haste. The handwriting was unmistakable. The loops of the letters, the slant, the careful yet emotional strokes, Princess Diana. For decades, the world had studied her every word, every public gesture, every interview. But these letters had never been seen. They were intimate, private, raw. Some were addressed to William, others to Harry, and still others to confidants whose names had been long forgotten. The room seemed to hum with tension. There was a weight to it, a sense that the very air had absorbed the emotion of the writings contained within. As the housekeeper stepped further inside, she noticed small details. A faint perfume lingering in the air, cobwebs stretched across corners, dust thick on the shelves, and yet the letters themselves seemed untouched by time. It was as if they had been waiting for someone to find them, waiting for this moment. She reached for a bundle tied in deep crimson ribbon. Her hands shook. The letters were fragile, the paper thin and delicate. Opening the top one, she realized almost immediately the depth of what she had uncovered. Diana's handwriting was impeccable, yet the words carried a sense of urgency, fear, and sorrow. Even decades later, the emotion was palpable. Every line seemed to pulse with life, as though the writer had just left the room and the echo of her presence remained. What made the discovery even more chilling was the content. Diana had written extensively about trust, about loyalty, about people she believed could not be relied upon. Some of her letters were straightforward, addressing her sons directly. Others were cryptic, written in a way that only those close to her might understand. There were moments of despair, moments of hope, and moments that were almost prophetic in nature. Could it be that she had anticipated dangers that her family would face long after her death? Could her warnings, written in the quiet desperation of her final weeks, hold answers to questions no one had yet dared to ask? As the staff continued to explore, they realized that the room contained more than letters. There were journals, notes, and personal reminders that provided glimpses into Diana's private life, the ordinary and the extraordinary intertwined. One stack contained details about everyday routines, favorite books, and fleeting moments of joy. Another contained observations about palace staff, court politics, and subtle warnings about the consequences of misplaced trust. Even small annotations in the margins carried meaning, hinting at Diana's acute awareness of the delicate balance of power within the monarchy. The atmosphere was electric. Every sound, footsteps, the rustle of paper, the faint hum of a heater, was amplified. The housekeeper's flashlight beam flicked across the room, illuminating bundles of letters that seemed to demand attention, as though they knew they had finally been found. She realized that these were more than historical artifacts. They were pieces of a puzzle, each letter a fragment of a larger narrative that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. And then, at the far end of the room, she noticed a single envelope unlike the others. The paper was heavier, the ribbon a deep crimson, and Diana's unmistakable handwriting was etched across it, to be read only in the event of tragedy. A shiver ran down her spine. What tragedy could Diana have foreseen? And who was meant to read this envelope? The questions multiplied, each one heavier than the last. Outside the room, the estate was quiet but tense. Security personnel had been alerted, and senior aides were gathering to assess the situation. News of the secret room and its contents could not be released publicly, yet the implications were immense. If the world learned of these letters, of Diana's private warnings, of the possible threats she had foreseen, the fallout would be extraordinary. But more immediately, those within the estate had to decide how to handle this revelation. How much should be revealed to William and Harry? Who should be the first to read the letters? And what dangers, if any, might be linked to the contents of the crimson envelope? Every detail of the room was now being documented. Photographs, notes, and preliminary assessments were being collected to ensure the integrity of the letters. Yet despite the order and procedure, an emotional weight lingered. Staff felt as though they were intruding on something sacred, something deeply personal. Diana's voice, though long gone, seemed to echo faintly in the room. And for those who had known her, even in passing, the experience was almost overwhelming. One aide, an expert in royal history, noted the significance immediately. This room, he said, is not just a collection of letters. It is a testament to Diana's foresight, her intellect, and her emotional depth. These are documents that could change everything we thought we knew about her family, and perhaps even about the events that have shaped the monarchy since her death. It became clear that the letters were not just private reflections, they were warnings. Some spoke directly of dangers that might affect William and Harry. Others hinted at betrayals that had occurred within the palace. The language was careful but deliberate. Diana had known that her letters could be discovered long after her passing, and she had written in a way that ensured her sons could interpret her warnings when the time came. The implications for William and Harry were staggering. For years, they had lived under the shadow of their mother's legacy, navigating the scrutiny of the public eye and the expectations of royalty. Now, they were faced with tangible proof of her foresight. Proof that Diana had not only understood the pressures of royal life, but had anticipated dangers that remained relevant even decades later. And yet, despite all the letters, one remained unopened. The crimson envelope marked, to be read only in the event of tragedy. Its presence loomed over everyone in the room. What did it contain? Why had Diana chosen to seal it so deliberately? And what, if anything, might it reveal about the tragedy that had unfolded that night at Sandringham? Questions hung in the air, unspoken but heavy with consequence. How much had Diana known? How much had she feared? And could the royal family, even now, fully comprehend the magnitude of what had been hidden in this secret room for so long? As dawn approached, casting pale light over Sandringham, the staff began to catalog the letters, carefully arranging them by date, by recipient, and by theme. The housekeeper, still trembling from the discovery, looked around the room one last time. Rows of letters, piles of documents, whispers of the past, all waiting for the right eyes, the right minds, to unlock their secrets. But even as the room's contents were organized and secured, one truth was undeniable. The discovery of this secret room had changed everything. Diana's words, her warnings, and her foresight were now tangible, undeniable, and the royal family would have to confront them, one letter at a time. And just as the first light of day touched the frost-covered grounds, a question lingered in the minds of all present. What secrets were truly contained within that crimson envelope? Who would be brave enough to open it first? And what revelations awaited that could shake the monarchy to its very core? The secret room had been revealed. Its contents were extraordinary, and yet, the most shocking discovery was still waiting to be unveiled. Handwriting that trembled with emotion, ink smudged as if written through tears. This was Diana at her most vulnerable. The secret room at Sandringham had revealed dozens of letters, but the ones that struck the estate staff most were those written during her final weeks. They were confessional, urgent, almost prophetic. Reading them was like listening to her voice echo through time, a voice that spoke of love, fear, and warnings for her sons that no one had ever fully understood. Imagine opening a letter and seeing the words, pinned with meticulous care, yet carrying a weight that seemed unbearable. Diana's script twisted with emotion, the loops of letters elongated in places, shortened abruptly in others, a mirror of the chaos she felt inside. Some letters began with simple greetings, "My dear William," or "Harry, you must understand." And yet, beneath the politeness, there was urgency, even desperation. These were not casual correspondences. They were cries from a mother's heart, meant to guide her children through dangers she had perceived too late in her own life. What made these letters extraordinary was their context. They were written during weeks when Diana's life had grown complicated, tense, and fraught with isolation. Public scrutiny had intensified, private conflicts had escalated, and she knew that her sons were navigating a world that would test them in ways few outsiders could imagine. Each letter was a blend of intimate confession, strategic advice, and warning, a combination that made the reader feel both privileged and burdened at the same time. Some letters addressed everyday concerns, favorite books, clothing preferences, small requests for correspondence with staff or family friends. Others were coded messages, hinting at palace intrigues, alliances, and betrayals. Diana's awareness of the dynamics at Sandringham, at Kensington Palace, and in royal circles across Europe was remarkable. She spoke of loyalty and deceit with an acute understanding of human nature. There were passages describing conversations she had overheard, moments she had observed, and fears she had harbored, all written with a clarity that suggested she had anticipated consequences long before they materialized. One letter, addressed simply to Harry, began with a startling line. "There is a shadow in the house that you cannot see, and yet it reaches closer than you imagine." The phrasing was cryptic but terrifying. The housekeeper who first opened the letter paused, feeling a chill run down her spine. Could Diana have sensed threats that would continue decades after her passing? Did she truly understand the pressures and dangers her sons would face in the very corridors she had once walked? The questions were immediate and impossible to ignore. Diana's letters were filled with emotional peaks, moments that could make even the most composed staff member tear up. She spoke of love for her children in ways that were intimate and raw. One passage read, "I wish I could protect you from everything, from the eyes that watch, from the whispers behind closed doors, from the hands that reach for power." The fear in her words was palpable, yet it was paired with an unwavering devotion. A mother's desire to shield her children from the dangers she foresaw. Her writing also reflected moments of humor and lightness. In the margins of some letters, she had scribbled personal jokes, teasing William about his obsession with sports or Harry about his tendency to speak without thinking. These small annotations reminded readers that Diana, for all her strategic awareness and foresight, was human. She laughed, loved, worried, and hoped. The letters were a window into the duality of her life, a woman of extraordinary public presence, yet profoundly private emotions. And yet, it was the warnings that struck the hardest. Diana wrote repeatedly about trust, cautioning her sons to be wary of those who seemed loyal but were not. She referenced individuals by initials, vague descriptors, or subtle hints that would only make sense to someone intimately familiar with palace dynamics. The letters suggested that she had seen manipulations and deceit long before they escalated, and that she had tried, in her limited capacity, to prepare William and Harry for the realities they would face. One particularly alarming letter read, "You must never assume that love and loyalty are the same. There are those who smile to your face while their intentions aim elsewhere. Watch closely, listen carefully, question often." The words were simple, yet their implications were staggering. How much had Diana known? How carefully had she observed the palace, the court, and the people closest to her children? Could these letters provide insight into events that had shaped the monarchy, both before and after her death? There were moments of sorrow that transcended time. In one note, Diana wrote of isolation, loneliness, and the burden of living in a world that never truly understood her. She reflected on public judgment, media scrutiny, and the way her personal struggles had become public spectacle. Yet, she wrote not to vent, but to instruct, to guide, and to protect. She acknowledged the pain she carried, but always framed it in terms of her children's future. The letters also revealed Diana's acute awareness of timing and consequence. She wrote about the importance of patience, the need for careful observation, and the dangers of impulsive decisions. "The smallest moment can have repercussions far beyond what you see," she wrote. "Even the quietest night can harbor shadows that will emerge when you least expect them." The estate staff felt an eerie resonance with this line, considering the very night they had discovered the secret room. It was almost as if Diana had anticipated that her words would be read under dramatic and unforeseen circumstances. Her warnings extended to relationships both within and beyond the family. She advised on alliances, subtly suggesting whom to trust and whom to observe from a distance. She wrote of colleagues and friends in the palace, highlighting nuances that might seem trivial but, in context, could determine loyalty and survival. These letters were both a map and a guide, filled with insights that required careful attention to decode. What made these letters profoundly gripping was the emotional transparency. Diana did not write as a queen or a public figure. She wrote as a mother, vulnerable yet determined, aware of the fragility of life and the impermanence of appearances. Every line carried urgency, every word a heartbeat of caution and care. The staff who handled the letters felt as though they were walking alongside her, hearing her voice, understanding her fears, and absorbing her unwavering devotion to her sons. And yet, among all these letters, one recurring theme emerged: the threat within. Diana's repeated references to betrayal, hidden agendas, and unseen dangers suggested she had knowledge that extended beyond the public eye. She warned her sons not only about external pressures, but also about internal ones: the subtle manipulations, whispered conspiracies, and complex interpersonal dynamics that could undermine them from within their own circle. The idea that danger could exist in the very environment meant to protect them was both terrifying and fascinating. As the estate staff continued to sort the letters, the gravity of what they had uncovered became undeniable. These were not mere documents. They were an inheritance of insight, a legacy of foresight, and a testament to Diana's enduring love and vigilance. They provided context to the pressures William and Harry had faced, illuminated the challenges they would continue to encounter, and hinted at truths that the monarchy itself had never publicly acknowledged. Audience question: imagine receiving a letter like this from someone you loved deeply, someone who had died decades ago. How would you react? Would you heed the warnings, or dismiss them as echoes of the past? The emotional weight is almost unbearable, and yet the reality is that these letters were written with intention, meant to guide, instruct, and protect. The most astonishing discovery, however, lay in the structure of the letters themselves. Diana had arranged them in a way that suggested a deliberate progression, a narrative that escalated in urgency and specificity. Some letters were personal and private. Others were strategic and observant. Some were almost poetic, reflecting her thoughts on love, life, and the delicate balance of power. Together, they painted a portrait of a mother acutely aware of the dangers her children would face and determined to equip them with knowledge, even if it arrived long after her death. Among these letters was one that seemed almost prophetic, written with ink slightly smudged as if hurriedly applied. It included phrases such as, "The moment of reckoning is closer than you know. Trust your instincts, protect each other, and never assume the world is what it seems." The phrasing sent shivers through those who read it. It was simultaneously a warning, a piece of advice, and a testament to Diana's acute understanding of human behavior. The letters carried layers of meaning. On the surface, they were intimate confessions and maternal guidance. Beneath, they were strategic instructions and warnings, coded in a way that only her sons, or perhaps those closest to her, could fully comprehend. It was a delicate balance, a combination of personal vulnerability and tactical foresight. Yet, despite the clarity in her handwriting and the depth of her foresight, the letters also left questions unanswered. Who exactly did she fear within the palace? What events had she anticipated with such precision? And most pressing of all, could her warnings have been acted upon in time to prevent future turmoil? The answers were elusive, teasing the reader with the possibility of revelation, but withholding full understanding until the right moment. As the sun began to rise over Sandringham, casting its pale light across frost-covered lawns, the estate staff realized the enormity of what they held. These letters were more than just a historical record. They were a lifeline connecting past to present, warning to action, mother to sons. The responsibility of interpreting them fell heavily on those who first discovered them, as well as on William and Harry, who would inevitably have to confront their mother's voice in a way that no one else could. And yet, even with all the letters examined, one envelope remained unopened, the crimson ribbon, the words "to be read only in the event of tragedy," etched across it in Diana's unmistakable handwriting. It was the final puzzle piece, the letter that might contain the truth about the danger she had perceived, the betrayal she had feared, and the legacy she had intended to leave behind. Its presence cast a shadow over the entire discovery, a tension that held everyone in its grip. What could be inside? Would it reveal the identity of the threat she feared? Or perhaps a message of hope, guidance, or reassurance? The uncertainty was almost unbearable. And the answer, when it came, would set the stage for revelations that could shake the royal family to its very core. There is a shadow in the house that you cannot see, and yet it reaches closer than you imagine. Those chilling words, scrawled in Princess Diana's unmistakable handwriting, seemed to echo through the hidden room at Sandringham. The letters, read carefully by the estate staff, revealed not only her vulnerability and love for her children, but also a fear that pierced the walls of the royal estate itself, a threat that came not from the outside, but from within. Imagine the weight of that knowledge. To realize that the danger your mother warned you about isn't a stranger lurking in the streets, but someone you know, someone close, someone trusted. Diana's insight was as profound as it was terrifying. These weren't the vague fears of an anxious parent. They were carefully observed patterns of behavior, insights into motives, and warnings intended to prepare her sons for battles no one else could see. The letters described, in subtle yet unmistakable ways, manipulations and betrayals that could be orchestrated by those who seemed closest to William and Harry. Some passages were coded, referencing initials or vague descriptors, but anyone with knowledge of palace dynamics could infer the potential actors. The letters hinted at deceit wrapped in loyalty, smiles that concealed malice, and whispered words that carried weight far beyond their volume. Diana's words read like a manual for navigating a minefield. One misstep could ignite a chain reaction that would harm the family, the monarchy, and perhaps even her sons directly. Do you see them? She had written in one letter. Do you notice the ones who speak kindly but watch intently? The ones whose counsel feels helpful but carries shadows? You must trust your instincts, for they are sharper than words. The estate staff, reading these passages in the dead of night, felt the hairs on their necks rise. Could it really be that Diana had identified these threats decades ago, foreseeing a danger that remained invisible to everyone else? Some letters were chilling in their prescience. Diana referenced events that, at the time of writing, were yet to occur, moments that would only make sense in hindsight. She wrote of power plays, of subtle manipulations, and of quiet betrayals that could shift the balance of trust within the palace. The idea that a mother could foresee these dynamics and yet feel powerless to protect her children from them is haunting. How much had she known? And how much did her sons understand even now? It wasn't just the abstract idea of betrayal that she feared. Diana's letters suggested a very human vulnerability, one that could manifest as jealousy, deceit, or the thirst for influence. She observed the behaviors of aides, advisors, and even family members, noting inconsistencies and subtle signs that indicated hidden motives. These weren't accusations. They were careful, thoughtful observations designed to prepare William and Harry for the kind of scrutiny and subtle manipulation they would inevitably face. The letters also revealed Diana's understanding of psychological tactics. She wrote about manipulation that could appear supportive on the surface but was designed to control or undermine. She warned about flattery that concealed agenda, advice offered with strings attached, and loyalty that was conditional, dependent on shifting allegiances. Every word was layered, every sentence carefully constructed to convey both caution and empowerment. She wanted her sons to recognize these threats, understand them, and act strategically without compromising their integrity or values. Audience question: have you ever felt a warning too subtle to fully grasp until later, when hindsight makes everything clear? Imagine receiving that kind of insight from someone you loved deeply, someone whose life was cut tragically short. How would you process it? Would you feel empowered, terrified, or both? Diana's foresight extended to the most intimate and personal relationships in her sons' lives. She wrote about people who could influence them emotionally, steering their decisions through sentiment rather than reason. She cautioned against blind trust, even in those closest to them. There was an urgency in her tone that suggested she had witnessed or experienced such manipulations firsthand. Her insights were grounded in her own experiences, betrayal, heartbreak, and the knowledge that appearances can be deceiving. One letter warned directly about the dangers of secrecy and silence. The ones who speak least are often those with the sharpest intent. Listen to what is not said. Notice the absence of words as much as their presence. Danger often hides in silence. The implications were staggering. How many missteps, how many conflicts, could have been mitigated if such wisdom had been heeded? The letters transformed from intimate confessions into strategic manuals for survival in the intricate web of royal life. The estate staff, carefully cataloging the letters, began to realize the scope of Diana's vision. She had not written haphazardly. Every line, every caution, every subtle warning was deliberately placed to prepare her sons for what lay ahead. And yet, the letters were also deeply personal, infused with maternal love and emotional vulnerability. She balanced instruction with affection, guidance with honesty, and foresight with empathy. It was a testament to the complexity of her mind and the depth of her care. What made the letters even more compelling was their blend of the ordinary and extraordinary. While Diana warned of political maneuvering and palace intrigue, she also spoke of everyday moments, sharing meals, celebrating birthdays, and finding joy in small things amidst the pressures of royal life. These glimpses into her daily existence humanized the warnings, making them feel grounded and real. The threat she described was not abstract. It was tangible, woven into the fabric of family life and relationships. In one particularly haunting passage, Diana wrote, "You may trust someone for years, only to discover that their loyalty is conditional, dependent on events or alliances you cannot yet foresee. Protect yourselves, protect each other, and never forget that love does not always equal safety." The weight of this statement lingered in the minds of those reading the letters. The implications were immediate and personal. Could William and Harry truly identify these threats today? Could they navigate the palace landscape with the insight their mother had left them? And then there were the letters that hinted at specific individuals. Diana never named names outright, but she used initials, subtle descriptors, and inside references that only those familiar with palace life might interpret. It was a puzzle, a test, a warning all in one. The letters demanded attention, intelligence, and discernment. They were not meant to alarm, but to prepare. And the realization that these warnings had been in place for decades, hidden in plain sight within Sandringham, added to their power and weight. The threat within was not just about politics or influence. It was about the preservation of legacy, the safety of her sons, and the continuation of a monarchy under scrutiny. Diana understood that trust, loyalty, and truth were delicate commodities, and she had left a roadmap for navigating them carefully. Her words were strategic and emotional, layered with nuance, and intended to equip William and Harry for the inevitable challenges they would face. Audience question: if someone you loved left you a map to navigate unseen dangers, but you only discovered it years later, would you follow it? Or would the delay make it too late to act? This is the tension William and Harry now face, confronted with the foresight of a mother who saw farther than anyone else could. The estate staff felt the weight of responsibility. The letters were more than historical artifacts. They were living instructions. They were proof of Diana's intelligence, courage, and foresight. Each warning was deliberate, each suggestion carefully placed, and each piece of advice a lifeline. The challenge now was to interpret them correctly and decide how much to reveal to the princes immediately. And yet, despite all the clarity in her observations, the letters also raised new questions. Who exactly did Diana fear within the palace? Were her warnings about betrayal still relevant today? And most importantly, could the family act on her guidance without causing additional conflict or mistrust? These unanswered questions hung over Sandringham, a tension as palpable as the cold winter air outside. Then there was the envelope that remained unopened, the crimson-ribboned letter, clearly marked, to be read only in the event of tragedy. It was the ultimate unknown, the final piece of the puzzle. What did it contain? Did it reveal the identity of the threat she had feared so deeply? Or did it offer guidance, a message of hope, a strategy to counter unseen forces? The suspense was nearly unbearable. As dawn broke over the frost-covered grounds, the gravity of Diana's foresight became unmistakable. She had left a legacy not only of love but of guidance, caution, and wisdom. Her words were now a bridge between past and present, a warning that the royal family could no longer ignore. When the news reached the royal family, silence fell over Sandringham, a silence heavier than any stormy night the estate had ever known. The discovery of Diana's letters, hidden for decades in a forgotten room, was more than just an emotional shock. It was a revelation that could challenge the very foundation of the monarchy, unearthing truths no one had expected to confront. And the reactions of those who had built their lives on tradition, protocol, and loyalty would reveal cracks that few outside the palace could ever imagine. Prince William, upon hearing of the letters, felt a mixture of awe and dread. He had known the intensity of his mother's mind, her fierce intellect, and her unrelenting care. Yet holding the knowledge that she had left warnings that seemed tailored to his life, his decisions, his responsibilities, was almost overwhelming. The room was flooded with his thoughts. How much did she anticipate? Could her guidance have prevented certain conflicts, certain heartbreaks, certain betrayals? Every memory of her, every moment of childhood joy or anguish, suddenly carried the weight of unfinished business. Harry, by contrast, reacted with a surge of emotion that had been years in the making. The pain of losing his mother, the unresolved grief, and the long-standing struggle with family dynamics all collided in a storm of anger, sorrow, and awe. He read the letters and felt her presence in a way he had not since her death. They were not just letters. They were conversations across time, warnings whispered from the past, instructions meant to guide him through a world that had often seemed unforgiving. For Harry, the letters were validation of everything he had felt, the intuition, the suspicions, the sense that not everything in the palace was as it seemed. And yet, the letters did not only provoke grief. They sparked immediate tension among other members of the family. Senior aides and palace officials were summoned to brief Charles, Camilla, and other close family members. Protocol dictated calm and composure, but what they witnessed was far from calm. Faces grew pale. eyebrows knitted in concern. Words were chosen carefully, but in the tension of the moment, some slipped, revealing underlying fear. The letters, it seemed, held not only warnings for the princes but also truths that could implicate others within the palace walls. Charles, always measured and deliberate in public, was said to have experienced a rare moment of vulnerability upon learning of the letters. For years, he had been aware of the scrutiny surrounding Diana's life and the complexities of their shared history. But holding knowledge that Diana had foreseen dangers, that she had warned her sons of unseen threats, brought a mixture of regret and apprehension. Could he have done more to protect her? Could he have acted differently to shield William and Harry from the dynamics Diana had anticipated? These questions, unspoken but heavy, filled the corridors of Sandringham as aides observed a monarch wrestling privately with memory, responsibility, and guilt. Camilla, long accustomed to navigating palace politics with finesse, reacted with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Though her relationship with Diana had been fraught in life, she understood the gravity of the discovery. The letters were not just artifacts, they were revelations. They offered insights into motivations, emotions, and strategies that few outside Diana's inner circle could ever have grasped. And for Camilla, the task was delicate: how to respond, what to reveal, and how to maintain composure while understanding the potential ramifications for the monarchy. Even more junior family members and extended relatives experienced a mix of shock, awe, and anxiety. For some, the letters validated long-held suspicions about palace dynamics. For others, they introduced questions that had never been considered. Whispers filled the corridors, conversations were measured but urgent, and the quiet of the estate was punctuated by the low hum of discussion. Everyone understood that the letters were not merely historical curiosities. They were active agents of insight, capable of influencing decisions and perceptions in the present. Audience question: imagine discovering something that changes everything you thought you knew about your family. How would you react? Would you confront the truth immediately, or take time to process the implications? For the royal family, the stakes were incomparably higher than any ordinary household. The discovery was public, symbolic, and deeply personal all at once. The emotional impact on William and Harry was magnified by the context of the night's tragedy. The initial disturbance, which had led to the discovery of the secret room, now seemed intertwined with Diana's warnings. The brothers could not separate their grief from their newfound understanding of her foresight. They were left to grapple with complex emotions: the pride of seeing her intelligence and care preserved, the anger at knowing certain warnings had never been acted upon, and the fear of what those warnings implied about the present. Within the palace walls, aides debated how best to present the letters to the princes. Some argued for transparency, believing that William and Harry should confront the letters in their entirety without delay. Others advocated for caution, fearing that the emotional impact could be destabilizing. Each option carried risk. Revealing the letters too abruptly could incite emotional turmoil. Delaying too long could erode trust and prevent the princes from fully understanding their mother's guidance. The balance was delicate, and every decision had consequences. Meanwhile, the broader family network reacted with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Cousins, distant relatives, and staff who had once interacted with Diana found themselves drawn into the mystery. Some speculated about the content of the letters. Were they warnings about power struggles, betrayal, relationships? Others feared the public exposure of intimate family dynamics. And the questions multiplied. Did the letters contain names? Did they implicate anyone alive today? Were there secrets that could reshape public understanding of the monarchy? Even in this controlled environment, tension and emotional spikes were inevitable. Personal rivalries, long-held grudges, and hidden fears collided with the raw emotion of Diana's voice from the past. Staff who had served the estate for decades found themselves grappling with their own memories of her, moments of warmth, sharp intelligence, and unyielding care. The letters were not just objects. They were a bridge to a past that had been both idealized and complicated, a past that demanded careful attention and reflection. Some aides were particularly struck by the letters' warnings about trust. Diana had written repeatedly about the dangers of placing faith in individuals whose intentions were not pure. These cautions were not vague. They were precise, based on careful observation, and designed to prepare her sons for challenges they could not yet foresee. William and Harry had grown up with a public perception of loyalty and tradition, but these letters revealed an undercurrent of strategic thinking and emotional intelligence that was extraordinary. Audience question: what would you do if someone you loved had left you warnings about people you trusted, written decades before you ever suspected a threat? Would you act immediately, or wait to see if the concerns were relevant? The emotional tension created by Diana's foresight forced the royal family to confront these very dilemmas in real time. The most emotionally charged reaction, however, came from Harry. The letters validated his intuition, his frustrations, and his lifelong struggle to reconcile his mother's warnings with the expectations of royal life. For William, the letters were both a roadmap and a reckoning. A chance to understand his mother's insights and a stark reminder of the responsibilities he bore. Both brothers faced a rare convergence of grief, anger, and duty, realizing that their mother's voice was now an active force influencing their decisions in the present. And yet, amid the emotional reactions, a practical question emerged: what to do with the letters? Should they remain hidden within the secret room? Should they be carefully cataloged and stored? Or should some portions be revealed to trusted advisors to guide the family? The answers were far from simple, and each choice